Welcome. Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on economic indexes. You see these numbers in headlines all the time, right? They're the tools that help us make sense of a really complex economy, and we're going to break down exactly how they work, nice and simple.
So have you ever seen a news report and just wondered how on earth can they talk about something as massive as inflation or the cost of living with just one single number? I mean, how do you boil down millions of people buying and selling stuff into one simple figure? Well, the answer is way more straightforward than you'd think. It all comes down to something called an index number.
So let's start with the absolute basics. The tool that makes all this possible is the index number. It's a really powerful idea, and honestly, a great way to think about it is as your own personal economic GPS. It helps you figure out where we are, where we've been, and maybe even where we're headed.
Okay, so what is an index number really? The official definition sounds a bit academic, right? A statistical measure showing changes in a variable. But let's cut through that. In plain English, it's just a way to compare something now to how it was before. It takes a ton of messy, complicated data and distills it into one easy-to-understand percentage that tells a pretty big story. And the whole concept hinges on this one simple idea. Every index has to have a starting point. We call that the base year. Think of it as our benchmark, our ground zero. Then we have the current year, which is, the period we actually want to measure. The entire point of an index is just to compare that current year back to our base year. That's it.
So what makes an index number tick? Well, first off, they're statistical tools. You can think of them as super specialized averages that we always show as a percentage. Their job is to measure the net change over time. And here's the golden rule. The base year is always set to an index value of 100. This is exactly why they get called barometers of economic activity. They give us a super quick reading of the economic weather.
And that barometer idea isn't just a catchy phrase. It really gets to the heart of why these numbers are so incredibly important. They have a real impact on all of us.
Honestly, these things are vital. Governments use them to decide on huge policies, everything from farming to what's happening with wages. Economists absolutely rely on them to spot long-term trends in production or trade. They even help us try to forecast what's coming next by looking at the patterns of the past. And of course, the big one, they're our #1 tool for measuring inflation.
Okay, theory is great, but how do we actually build one of these things? Let's get our hands dirty and start right at the ground floor with the most straightforward method there is.
This is what's known as the simple aggregative method. It's literally a three-step process. First, you take your group of items, your basket of goods, and you add up all their prices in the base year. That total is your P0. Step 2, you add up the prices of those exact same items in the current year. That's your P1. And finally, you just divide the current total by the base total and multiply by 100. That's all there is to it.
Let's make this real with a quick example. So in our base year, 2010, let's say our basket of 4 items costs a total of $220. Fast forward 5 years, and that same basket now costs $300. We just plug those numbers into our formula, and we get 136.36. Now, here's the important part. That's not just some random number. It's telling us a story. It means there was a 36.36% price increase for this little basket of goods between 2010 and 2015. See? Simple.
And this same simple logic isn't just for prices. You can use the exact same method to measure changes in quantity, like how much stuff we're actually making or buying, or even value, which is just the price times the quantity.
Now, that simple index is pretty useful, but it has one kind of big flaw. It treats every single item as if it's equally important. This brings us to a much more sophisticated method that gives us a way more realistic picture of the economy.
I mean, think about it for a second. Is a 10% jump in the price of salt really as important to your wallet or to the entire economy as a 10% jump in the price of fuel? No way, right? Some things just matter more than others.
And that is exactly where weighted index numbers come in. They solve this problem by giving a weight to each item, which is usually based on how much of it we buy. This makes sure that things we spend more money on, like fuel, have a much bigger impact on the final number. To do this, we're going to look at 2 of the most famous methods out there, both from some pretty smart German economists back in the day.
First up, we've got the Laspers index. The key idea here is all about consistency. It measures the price change of a fixed basket of goods from the past. So it uses the quantities from the base year as its weights.
Okay, don't let the formula intimidate you. The logic is actually really clear. The top part is the cost of the old shopping list at today's prices. The bottom part is what that exact same shopping list cost back then. We're just comparing the cost of a fixed historical basket of goods. The key is that the quantity, that Q0, never changes.
Now, our second method comes from Herman Pache, and he took a totally different approach. Instead of looking at a fixed basket from the past, his index uses the quantities from the current year as weights. It basically asks, how much more does my shopping list from today cost compared to what it would have cost back in the base year?
And you can see that change right here in the formula. Look closely. The only thing that's different from loss bears is the Q. Instead of Q0, we're now using Q1, the current quantity. So the top is the total cost of what we're buying today. The bottom is what that same stuff would have cost us way back in the base year.
So let's just boil this down to the key difference. Lasperia's is like looking in the rearview mirror. It uses an old fixed basket of goods to see how prices have changed. This is awesome for tracking the cost of a consistent lifestyle over time. Posh, on the other hand, is like looking at your dashboard right now. It uses today's shopping list. This is great because it reflects our current habits, but it makes comparing year to year a little trickier. It's a really subtle but super important difference. All right, before we finish up, it's really important to remember something. As powerful as these tools are, they are not magic bullets. They're not infallible. They definitely have their limits.
For starters, they're based on samples, right? They don't include every single thing in an economy. Then there's the chance for bias in how the data is collected. They can also be misused. Someone could pick a really weird base year just to make the numbers show what they want them to show. And this is a huge one. They almost always ignore changes in quality. So if your new laptop is twice as fast but costs 20% more, the index just sees a price hike. And finally, deciding on those weights can sometimes be a little subjective.
You know, one of our sources really hits the nail on the head here. It says that while index numbers are useful, their limitations mean they aren't completely reliable. And that's the perfect reminder to always look at these numbers with a critical eye. So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? Well, index numbers are absolutely essential. They're how we see the big economic picture and turn a chaotic flood of data into something we can actually understand. But we have to remember what they are. They are a simplified snapshot, a useful model of reality, but not reality itself. And that kind of brings us to a final thought. We know every number tells a story, but we also know that story isn't always complete. So I'll leave you with a question to chew on. What story do you think today's economic numbers might be missing?